I wanted to just end on the kind of the equipping side of pastoring and talk about pastoring in a way that reaches up and raises up ministry to the second and third generation. You know, one thing we declare over Heart for the World is we will change Las Cruces to the second, third, and fourth generation. The fifth generation will let the kids do that, but we got to get fourth generation. But then I was trying to think of it. I said, we have the greatest generation: boomers, busters, millennials, Gen Zs, and alphas. Am I right on those? That's sixth generation. So right now in our church, we have at least six, and I'm not sure how you do all those things. But the goal of this is to have a church that I like to say it this way, that keeps growing younger, even as some of us grow older. That we never leave a generation behind. I've always been moved by this verse, John 15:16. Jesus said, "You did not choose me, I chose you, and I ordained you that you would go bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain." And that word stands out to me so much. I've seen a lot of people who have fruit that was there for a couple days or years, but it did not remain. And churches that were there, but you can't tell they were ever there because now they're gone and nothing much is left. And Jesus' plan for us is fruit that keeps on. It's there for the long run. And so I really want to talk about how do we put these future generations as we're pastoring. Like I say, not in our rear view mirror, not in the back seat. Quiet, I'm driving. But we become driver's ed teachers. And we say, sorry, I'm moving over. Come over here. Here's the wheel. How many know that gets life exciting? When you let your kids drive. Anybody train your kids to drive? Okay. I see some PTSD right now in the room. That's happening. Here is some Psalm 78. I love this verse, 4-8. We will not hide your truth from our descendants. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he has done. He commanded our ancestors to teach their children so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. Then they would put their trust in God and would not forget his deeds, but they would keep his commands. They would not be like their ancestors, a stubborn and rebellious generation. Isn't that a powerful verse? Why is this so important? Obviously, many churches grow old and die. And it's sometimes not even thought of until it's too late. You say, what's wrong with our church? Why is it shrinking? Have you noticed? Look at the hair. Okay, just look at the hair in your church. It's all getting just gray. Nothing wrong with gray. Thank God I'm one of those. But is it getting younger as it gets older? That's a huge responsibility and a great challenge. I was deeply moved by a book I highly recommend called The Generations by Pastor Hao and Leah from Heart of God Church in Singapore. They are a church where the average age, I cannot believe this, their average church age is under 20. Wow. And they're a church of 20,000 people. Their sound technician is, I think, 8 or 9 years old who helps. They have over 40 pastors that are under the age of 16. And their whole church was an experiment to say, we will create a church of the future generations. And they said the tough thing is now it's 15 years old, and they've had, how do you keep getting the next generation? But it was a powerful book. Gerald Brooks says the natural church life is 27 years. That's about the time that a pastor or someone grows up and raises their kids. And it's interesting, in the average church, once someone's kids are raised, they start to forget about the next group of people's kids. But the other important factor about that is the wineskins that you used 27 years ago, they're drying up right now. You can't just put it on coast. You've got to continue to create. What is the wineskin for this generation? And if you're old like me, you like to still go to the same restaurant you went to 27 years ago or whatever. But the kids aren't going there, okay? So you may have to make some adjustment. That's what I'm trying to say there. This was very alarming to me, according to Chris Hodges, that in the current rate of America, because so many pastors are baby boomers, here I am, that there will be 20% less pastors in churches 10 years from now because the boomers will retire. Unless there's a radical stirring, this is the first generation, from what I understand, in over 200 years, where America's churches are less as the population has grown bigger. And we're on course to be like Europe is right now. And how many say, in Jesus' name, no? And so we need more of those people in this room to hear that, to say, hey, I'm going to be there 10 years from now. I'm going to do this. God's plan is for us not to just have victories and memories, but legacies. Victory is what he achieves through us. Legacy is what he achieves through those we raise up. The most important thing is not what you leave behind, but who you leave behind. Who did you leave behind who is able to do what you did and better? Proverbs 13:22, a righteous man leaves an inheritance to their children's children. There we go. There's the 4 generations here. Our greatest accomplishment in life is the fruit we help grow on other people's trees. I just want to keep that in our mind. I'm in this thing right now because Chris told us to write thank you cards. So I'm in this race to get out 50 thank you texts or something by Thanksgiving. But one of them is just to tell my kids, you are our greatest achievement. What you are and what you've done is the thing that we're most proud of in our life. Next page, we must never forget why Jesus' ministry multiplied. How did that little ministry completely take over the Roman Empire in just less than 200 years? And it's so interesting to find out that he spent most of his time with the group of 12. And after research, because how mentoring happened in those days, many scholars believe that most of his disciples were teenagers. I know you don't think of that. My natural mind thinks of these guys with gray beards or whatever.
In their 30s at least.
What?
In their 30s
right.
at least.
But evidence in that maybe the Apostle John was more like 17. But for sure they were in their 20s, except for Peter may have been 30. But I just thought that was a good way to refocus your mind. Think of your 15-year-old, not the 40-year-old in church. And that's who Jesus entrusted the whole church to. God's greatest plans take more than one generation to fulfill. And you've heard me talk about, we need to think like the monarch butterfly. What did we say about that? That's a butterfly that goes from Canada to Costa Rica. But it takes 4 generations to get there. So it dies, and then its kids take the next lap, and then they die, and then the next generation. It takes 4 generations to get to their destination. Very few of you, and me included, think, God, your plan for my life is going to take 4 generations. We only think, how are we going to do this in the next 2 years? And this bigger vision. I was looking at irrigating the other day, and this is what came to my mind. The further you want to irrigate, the earlier you have to start letting the water out. The more you have to think ahead. How if you really want to right now change 2040, you have to be preparing now for that. You can't wait till 2039. So I love this picture that God is a God of generations. It took 76 generations from Adam to Jesus. Isn't that interesting? It took 76 generations before the world was ready. If I was God, I would have brought him the first generation. It wasn't the right time. And he had to work, and he worked through people like David. And wasn't it interesting? You know what David's biggest achievement was? You will be called, your offspring will be, the Messiah will be called the Son of David. You set your life up so I could trust you with the legacy that would bring in another 20 generations the Son of God to earth. It's a powerful thing to think about. I shared with you, you all heard me talk about my dad and missionary to Durango in the 60s, and they returned and they felt like they were failures. But among other things, they had this little baby girl that was born 3 months premature. And she was supposed to die, and they built this little homemade down in the mission field, this little kind of incubator, whatever, with lights, and literally she was raised in a shoebox. And certainly now, Janie married a missionary's kid from El Salvador, and they've given their life to missions in Mexico. But had all of that happened, I don't know. But God often is the God of generations in ways that are beyond us. I like what Timothy says. I am convinced that the faith that dwelt in your mother Yodia and your grandmother Lois, and please forgive me, Sherry, because I did not edit any of this. And so I know it's driving you crazy right now. Anyhow, please forgive me. Anyhow, I just had to write it quickly by memory. That's the impressive part, that you did it from memory. Yeah, I didn't have time to look up the reference. But the faith, that faith is in you. Isn't that incredible? Who's going to say, oh, and the faith that was in your sister Elitzi, or your auntie, or your grandmother, that's what is happening right now. And that's the big news today. And it's powerful, isn't it? It's in you. But then he says, stir up the gift. You now, and this generation, have to take what's been imparted, make it powerful, and make it bigger for the next generation. 2 Timothy 2:2. This one I actually did look up. And the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. So I want you to see 4 generations there. Paul speaks it. Someone hears it. They teach someone who teaches somebody. That's how the church is supposed to work. 4 generations. And I'll talk to you about this more, but notice, I want you to see that word, the things that you have. In the King James, it says the things you've heard and seen. In this new NIV, it doesn't really mention that. But I love it in the King James, it says what you saw and what you heard. How many know much of our discipleship is not what we said, but what they saw? I love just a famous quote by John Wood, and don't tell me what you believe, just show me. Don't tell me what you can do, just show me. Because if you don't show me, it doesn't really matter. So show me joy. Don't tell me a sermon on joy. Show me forgiveness, and then I'll understand it. Here's what I say. The ministry of Jesus is a relay race. I love the quote by John Maxwell. No matter how fast you run in a relay race, if you fail to pass the baton, you lose. So, wow, you're fast. Yeah, but you dropped the baton. What Olympics was it that the U.S. was supposed to win, the 4x400, whatever it was? And then they dropped the baton. They didn't even place. And they had the fastest people in the world. And I don't know about you, but that scares me a little bit. You know, somebody say, wow, Pastor, you run pretty fast. You got it pretty fast. Yeah. But bro, if you don't take this baton, I lost. And so whatever I have to slow down to do, and that's what some of us don't like. To pass the baton, all of a sudden, you don't get to be flashy. You don't get to, strut. You got to slow way down. And you got to find that next person. And you got to look for their hand. And you got to keep focused until you see it in their hand. And you don't really breathe until they've got it and they're running. And
you've only got the box to do it.
You got the box to do it.
That's true. Before or after the box, it didn't.
How many feel like your life is in the box right now? I better do this really right now. Really got to get this done here. So I like to say there's no work that you'll do for God that is successful until someone that knows you is doing it too. One of the greatest measures of success is turning something over to others who can do it 80% as good as you. If a younger or newer person, and this is something I heard John Maxwell say, can do what you do 80% as good as you do it, chances are they're going to someday do it better than you. Isn't that interesting? Many of us don't pass it on because we think, well, I can do it better. Why should I let them teach? Why should I let them lead worship? I can do it better. No, but if they can sort of do it as good as you, that means they've already probably grown more than you had grown by that time. And if you start letting them do it, chances are not only are they going to be able to do it okay, they're going to exceed you pretty soon. The moment two people are doing something, your ministry just doubled. The moment three people are doing what you do, it tripled. It's called exponential. You don't even know how fast it grows. That's just an incredible thing. Probably the greatest thing I will do this year will not be what I did this year. But I will have gotten somebody up running, doing what they weren't doing before, and now they're doing it, and I'm doing it, and now I just doubled my impact on the world. But you don't see that on the stage. It's all happening in the background. So I always tell, a good church has a great stage presence. A great church has an even better behind the stage presence. Good churches, they have a great Sunday program, but a great church is what you never see because they work harder at mentoring, at discipling, at prayer, all the hidden things that create the long-term growth. I don't know if this makes sense, but I felt like the Lord says, don't build a snowball, create a snowball that becomes a landslide. Just push something over that mountain. Just get something rolling, and it's so beautiful with younger people. I just enjoyed talking to Pat about her grandson Jude, and isn't it amazing how much he could change in a few months? When I found out 50-year-olds, it takes twice as long. 70-year-olds, it takes. Isn't it amazing? The earlier the start, the faster they grow. And so if you want to disciple someone and see quick results, go find the 15-year-old, find the wet cement, and you'll multiply how quickly they'll catch it. Because they have what? Less to unlearn. Someone my age, everything I learned, I had this whole bunch of files I have to get rid of and unlearn it so I can learn it, And believe it or not, I still have all paper files in a paper cabinet. Why don't you put that file on your computer? It's right there. I don't know, but I'd have to unlearn what I've done for 40 years. So go beside the kids' church and you'll see a whole office with these huge filing cabinets that are chaos. Because it's too hard to unlearn not filing after I filed for 30. Never mind. Somebody say, I feel your pain. Unlearning is hard. So what are keys to pastoring a multi-generational church that outlives us and outgrows us? And again, I just want to refer to, because my brother Tommy, he goes to a church that celebrated their 100th anniversary. Really? It's called Christian Assembly in Eagle Rock, California. And did you it has grown every decade for 100 years. it has been on a solid trajectory. How many? That's really unusual.
Yes.
And so I've gone out to their church many times because I just want to watch this. You know what? One thing he did, when Tommy was in his prime, instead of leading worship every Sunday, he started just leading worship 2 Sundays. Now, many of you know Tommy. You'd say, man, if I got Tommy as my worship leader, he's going to be up there every week. Now he leads about once every 2 months. But he goes to the worship practice. He interviews future worship leaders. He gives input to all the worship teams. That's how you get to church. And so I'm just saying, yes, our church started in 1997. So can we just think of what's going to be like, in the 90s, the next 97, and say, will this church be thriving if Jesus doesn't come? Just an interesting thought, isn't it? So I said what I've already been talking about. It all starts with mindset. The main reason some churches keep thriving and others die, it's how they think. And if you are around churches a lot, you'll figure it out within just a few weeks what their mindset is. Is it us four and no more? We're going to make all the decisions. We're going to control the money. We're going to decide what the kids get to eat. We're going to do it all. Okay. You're not going too far or too long. Here's some so I just wrote a bunch of mindset thoughts. John said, I have no greater joy than to hear my children are walking in truth. All of a sudden that becomes your greatest joy. Your greatest joy isn't, man, I killed it today. Your greatest joy is, my grandkids killed it today. Wow. That is huge. Our youth are our greatest achievement. We must decrease so they can increase. Next page, if I raise up others, they won't replace me, they will increase me. Why is the main reason we don't raise up others? They'll replace me. And then I won't have anything to do. And there could not be a more false notion. In the kingdom of God, as soon as you equip someone else to do something, guess what? You get promoted. You just get to do bigger and better things. But that tendency to want to hold on to your role, your title, your gift is so common in human beings. Our calling and God's promise is Isaiah 58:12. You will raise up the foundations of many generations. Could we just make this a declaration for Heart for the World today? You will raise up the foundations of many generations. Now speak this over your families. You will raise up the foundations of many generations. Isn't that a great declaration? I love it. The greatest thing God could do with my life will be what happens beyond my life. The greatest life is a life that outlived us. I really looked at David. Probably David represents this more than anyone. Why did God choose David, this is my question today, to be the legacy carrier for Jesus beyond anyone? Why was Jesus called the Son of David? I am convinced if you read his life, he thought legacy from his youth, not from his old age. Sadly, and I'll confess to myself, I didn't think about legacy very much even in my 50s. It wasn't until I got into my 60s I got to think about legacy. And here's the key I'm going to say later. The younger anybody starts doing anything, the farther they go and get in what they do. This is the secret of success. The younger you start, the further you go. So thank God for all of you younger than me. Think about it now. So David started raising up the mighty men. Isn't it interesting? The main chapters about David quickly refer to the mighty. Before David, there were no giant killers. 20 years later, giant killers were average. They were like people who work at Circle K. I mean, they're just there everywhere. Why? Because from the beginning, he invested. He raised up a team. He built a team. And Therefore, God said, I know if I give you the calling, you'll raise up the generations. So you're my appointment. And at the end of his life in 2 Samuel, he wants to build a temple, and God says, no, but I'm going to build you a dynasty because I can trust you, your sons and your daughters. I'll just read a couple of those verses. Again, this is an unedited one. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you. Your own flesh and blood will succeed you, and I will establish their kingdom. David, I just love David. He gasped. 3 times he says this in that book. Who is David that you could choose me? He didn't say, darn, I wanted to build a temple. He said, who am I? How could I be so blessed that you're going to let my son and my grandson and my great-grandson? How amazing that I'm going to have a front row seat in heaven watching them kill it. What a blessing. That's the greatest gift you could ever give me, God. I put in there, Acts 2:17, the reason the Spirit is being poured out on you is so that your sons and daughters can prophesy. That's what he says, right? I'm going to pour out my Spirit on everybody. You know the number one reason? So your sons and daughters will prophesy. Wow. God, why are you blessing? Number one reason, so your sons and daughters are caught up in something that's incredible, so they can carry this farther, bigger. And I've told you this story, but it is internalized now at a level it wasn't 30 years ago, when my parents and my mom, she literally was one of the most strategic discipleship people. Wow, I don't know why I'm getting emotional. Sorry about that. But I just share it because I want to do this for my kids or for my spiritual kids. So once I started to preach, she said, I found out my role. It's to decrease so you can increase. You're my greatest, she kept saying, you're my greatest accomplishment. So for 2 years, almost 3 times a week, I'd write sermons because she would have me read them to her. And before I ever preached to people, she wanted to keep speaking to them. She prayed prophetically. This was so powerful. I told you this story that when I finally went to the Philippines, she gives me this bra in the Philippines. She said, when you were less than 3 years old, I had a vision of you wearing this, but I never could tell you you were going to the Philippines. But prophetically, God said, I will show you many things about his life, and you can't tell him until it happens. But when it happens and you tell him, he'll know he's on track. So up till the day she died, I was like, is there anything else?
Anything else in the journal I should know about?
I know. And she said, there is, but I can't tell you. And so I don't think I hit all the benchmarks. But anyhow,
It's like a prophecy.
it was prophetic.
Yeah.
And prophetic is the greatest mentoring tool there is.
Yeah.
Because if you can see what they're supposed to be, you can teach them what they need to know. And so I just tell every Christian, you could be prophetic with your grandkids. So that's why I made a commitment. Every time one of my grandkids has a birthday, I give them a prophecy. And I just text them a prophecy. So Liam's next, and the day before. So I got 20 of them. So this is a pretty regular thing. And now I got a great granddaughter. That's too much, but she can't text yet. But anyhow, you know what's so powerful about that? If you position yourself, God says, I've given you the gift of prophecy, but there's no greater use that you will ever use it for than to prophesy over your descendants. So just try it. It's pretty powerful. So how do you, as a church then, create a church that outlives you? You always start with the end in mind. This is one of the hardest things to learn if you want to have an influence for 100 years, think 100 years from now. If you want to have an influence 5 years, you just have to think 5 years from now. The further out you can think, then you can say, what do I got to do to get to there? And you draw the map. Obviously, God saw the end from the beginning. So he's been planning from before the beginning began. And he's planned your life. Every day he already wrote it. So he could figure out how to get you to where you need to be. Next, I just put here, give the next generations the front row in your church. And I was blessed at the Tommy concert. I got all kinds of compliments from the California team. This is the most awesome thing. You had the whole youth group in the front row. And they just couldn't say enough about that. But that's not just a physical event. That's a mindset. I said it earlier. What Pastor House said. He said, if you see youth as the greatest need is to entertain them, you will raise up spectators. If you see as the greatest need they have is to equip them, you will raise up a mighty army. If you babysit, guess what you'll get? Babies. If you challenge, if you take them to war, what will you get? Missionaries, warriors. And so it's no surprise you heard it 2 weeks ago when Chris preached. One of the most impacting things in his life is taking them to the Philippines as a teenager and creating events where they were the stars, the basketball camp and all of that. How do we push them to the front row? That's our biggest question as a church and as you pastor. And this could be a life group, this could be your family, whatever it is, you're going to pastor. You have to do that intentionally. Because what is the natural mind? There's a pecking order. And they're last on the list. And God says, no, suffer the little children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of God. You flip that script very quickly. What Pastor Howe recommended, he says, start by having every ministry of your church and insisting that on every team in your church there's at least one person under 20 years old. Whether it's media or whether it's worship team, you've got to decide we're always going to grow young, no matter what we do. The younger they start, the further they go, the more fruit they will bear. You can beat anyone in a race if you get a 90-yard head start. And I am so incredibly grateful to get to have started at 15. I could not have done half of the things I got to do if I had started later. So constantly challenge the young people, Pastor House said, give God the best years of your life. Just constantly push that. Why? This was an incredible word. He says, if you don't capture the hearts of your kids and youth while they're young, other things will capture their hearts. By the time they get to college, by the time they get involved, they'll have 100 things come and capture them. But remember the prime target. And we've figured it out at Heart for the World right now at 6th grade. The most excited, energetic, passionate, and crazy. But just go to youth group, right? Because Mike has a 6th grader. Yep. And they're like, I'm in youth! Oh my gosh! Ah! And you know what? The natural tendency is sit back and wait for your time. And you know what? By the time they're 18, they might not even want to go to youth group anymore. If you don't pour gasoline when the fire starts to flame in a big way. Mold the cement while it's wet. I love this picture of Psalm 127. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Isn't that powerful? Just think of them this way. While they're young, you can shoot that arrow. When they're old, you got to find the arrow. And sometimes they're hard to find, aren't they? So whatever age they are, where you can say, I can shoot that arrow. And I've been enjoying me and Noah, the 6th grader, have a due date every Sunday after church. Go to McDonald's is his favorite, or whatever it is. Why? Because he'll go anywhere with me now. 3 years from now, I don't know. But I did that with my kids. When they turned 13, I discipled them. And I took them to breakfast at McDonald's every Saturday. And every one of them loved it. By the time they were 16, they didn't all want to go with me. But when they were 13, oh yeah, me and my dad are going. Especially because their sisters didn't get to go. But anyhow.
And how you were saying, I must decrease so you can increase.
Decrease,
Yeah. When you said that, right away I got, follow me and I will make you fishers of men.
I love it. Follow me and I will make you fishers of men, she's saying with that. And isn't that interesting? He didn't say, well, follow me and you can watch me fish. Immediately. Focus on investing those who are ready and hungry. One of the greatest motivators is to see people when they're hungry, to see when there's fire and pour gasoline on it, just to try to see. And it's often we just miss those moments. We just miss those moments. I'm just thinking of someone, maybe in the church or they're new, and you just see in that their first love for Jesus. It's like, oh, I gotta get them. I'm thinking of Lizette. She's just somebody in our church that is right now on fire and helping in kids ministry, and I just felt in my heart there's a window there. You've got to get everything you can into her. She's there. She's ready. She's hungry. She's doing it.
She goes to the homeless tent city every Saturday
Yeah,
morning.
that's it.
And feeds 40, 50 people.
She's awesome, isn't she? And that's why we as older brothers and sisters in Christ are watching that. And man, we're trying to fan that flame. Give the highest focus of your time around the priority of equipping. You can't just tell them, you have to show them and watch them and help them start over time and time again. Make the role of a spiritual mom, dad, brother, or sister your biggest thing in life. How do you know if you're discipling people? It's because you're having to show them the same thing over and over. It's just like parenting, isn't it? It's not glamorous. It's very, very slow. It's taking the time to help them process some things that if you're impatient like me, you say, you should just know that. Get the act together. Here's what the Bible says. Go do it. That's not mentoring. Tell me again what happened. Okay, let's go back. That whole process. Intentionally create teams that are multi-generational. Continue to try to make your bench deeper and more multi-generational. In other words, if you're leading a ministry, the success of your ministry is not how it's doing now, but how many are on your bench ready to step into the game. And if there's no one on your bench, you're in trouble. What one pastor said, most ministries in church are just one bad case of pneumonia away from collapsing. That's a negative way to say it, but if somebody gets sick for 3 months and they're the person, look out, it's going down. Versus, wow, there was 4 other people on the bench and they can get well and nobody ever noticed that it was, and I will say it was a proud moment in my life when I broke my knee and I was out and what would happen to the church, and it didn't skip a beat. I said, why didn't I just take a vacation? Why did I have to fall off a mountain? But anyhow. And then finally, focus on impartation, not just information. Most of the greatest gifts of revelation and empowerment are caught more than taught. Mark Cole says, it's the power of proximity. All forms of mentoring involve giving people the chance to ride shotgun in a way that they catch it, that they feel it. One writer said, it wasn't just the words you said or the things you did. It was that when I was around you, I got a sense of God. And I began to think the way you would think about what I'm about to do. So it's the weirdest thing. I don't even remember you teaching me, but all of a sudden I figured out a problem. And when I look back, I said, oh, the reason I figured out that problem is because that's how he would think. And I didn't even know I was thinking how you thought, but because I listened to you and I thought with you about thinking, before I knew it, I was thinking like you think. Does that make sense? That's mentoring. I didn't even realize I learned until others started learning from me and treating me like I was so wise. And I realized all I was doing was passing on what had been passed to me. So you may not even know when you're mentoring, and sometimes it may seem like a waste of time, but that it's the personal proximity of spending time with people. And I think what good leaders do is they invest in people. Great leaders look for the people they're going to invest in. And that's what Jesus did. He found his disciples. He didn't wait for them to find him. Come, follow me. I love this quote. I just wanted to read it because I thought it was so good, because I'm trying to inspire young people. And inspiring young people, one of the things I found that inspires them, it says, do you want to be great? And most of them say yes, even though they have no idea what that means. But I love to tell them, would you like to be great? I know you're not just one of those average ones. I know you don't just want to play sports. You want to be great at sports, don't you? You don't want to just, make money. You want to be the greatest money maker there ever has been, right? And they almost always say, yes, yeah. Well, here's what John Maxwell says. Here's the 6 ways you become great. Go to great events, seek out great people, ask great questions, read great books, find great mentors, and continually attempt to do great things, many of which will destined to fail at over and over, but never quit trying, learning, and growing. Stay humble, open, and hungry. You will never arrive or know as much as you could or should, but always be starving to learn more. As a church, it means creating systems, and this is something we're in the middle of. We're always experimenting. So Sunday at church, we're trying to take 301 and say, how could it be more effective to actually get people in their ministry? They know their shape, but we had way too few people go through 301 who actually then engage and are doing ministry in our church. How do we get better at that? So we're trying a whole new system. But I believe that one of the best ways to think as a pastor and leader is you tend to think about the crowd, but you should think more about the core. If the right people come into the core, the new people will show up at the door. Hey, I didn't even just say it. Did you get that, Sherry? Would you like that? What am I saying? Churches grow from the inside out. If you get the right people serving on the inside, you don't have to worry about the outside. And so always think about the core. So even if you're leading a life group or the usher team or whatever it is, you're always looking, who is one person I could see someday could do this without me? And that's the person you just want to go for in every way you can. And you're pointing at Eric. Oh, okay. All right, here you go. I love this acronym for CORE. They are the committed, they are the onboarded, they are the relationally tight, they hang out beyond the meetings, and they are equipped. They love to get new batons handed to them. And when you give them to them, they don't just stare and say, what is this? They say, oh, I'm going to start running now. I don't know what I'm doing, but here I go. And I do think that describes Eric to a T. There you go. But who could be in our core? And so Heart for the World will be as great as its core. And so we're always like, how do I get someone from the pew to the core? And that's a strategic way of thinking. And then learn to bless your potential proteges. According to the book, The Gift or Power of Blessing by Gary Smalling, there are 5-6 ways to impart to someone or to give the blessing. They are a meaningful touch. Those are a hug or just a tap on the shoulder. I just thought I was reading a book, and this is just off the cuff. I just thought it was interesting. They said if in a very discreet, even unnoticeable way, from time to time, if you just touch someone's shoulder, they will be 10% more attentive to the next thing you say. I mean, again, I don't mean being weird or creepy. I just mean, oh, that's so cool. And you just that, oh. And some people don't like it, so be careful. But anyhow, number 2, spoken messages, affirmation, or giving coaching, loving coaching. Hey, wow, that was really good. You know what I saw you do right now? That was a home run. Wow. Man, if you do that again, you're just gonna knock it out of the park every time. That was incredible. Attaching high value, letting them feel like you think they're the greatest people in the world, by appreciating them, speaking up with always an attitude that assumes that they know the best, that they're the smartest and the greatest and the brightest, never talking down to people. Picturing a special future, we call that prophetic ministry. Here's what I could see you being someday. And the envisioning tool that every Christian has by the Holy Spirit. Asking questions that draw out their dreams. And then active commitment, number 5. Be involved in them getting the best tools and opportunities they can. And this is just such an advantage I wish everyone had, is just saying, especially if you're going to mentor someone who was raised by a single mom, or I don't care what it is. And you think about it and you say, what tools did they not get organically for whatever reason? Or they weren't raised in a Christian home, or whatever it is. And then you just strategically say, how can I open doors for them? What's an event that I could take them to? What is a book that I could give them to read? What if I took them to this movie about this great hero? We'll go watch Reagan and then we'll talk about it afterwards. Or wait, what could I create that as a result would naturally make their resume better, bigger, and stronger? So those are some thoughts, and those are some questions to just discuss. What do you think stands out as a main reason organizations like churches die and have shelf lives? And my point about the shelf life is you have to keep creating new shelf lives. This is going to be our new shelf life. What do you think keeps us and other leaders from investing adequate time in succession and equipping the next generation? What will you do to start growing more fruit on other people's trees? Those were some of the just off the cuff questions. So why don't you guys just talk about it a minute? And it's 10 to 1, and then you can go from there.